In the Dungeons & Dragons fantasy role-playing game, a vampire is an undead creature. A humanoid or monstrous humanoid creature can become a vampire and looks as it did in life, with pale skin, haunting red eyes, and a feral cast to its features. A new vampire is created when another vampire drains the life out of a living creature. Its depiction is related to those in the 1930s and 1940s Hollywood Dracula and monster movies. In writing vampires into the game, as with other creatures arising in folklore, the authors had to consider what elements arising in more recent popular culture should be incorporated into their description and characteristics. Vampires in Dungeons & Dragons are one of the most insidious types of undead, brilliant masterminds who dominate entire towns and nations, bringing them under their control and using them as a personal feed bank. They can transform into bats, or call bats, rats, or wolves to aid them, and can also evaporate into a cloud of gas in order to escape. They can charm people simply by meeting their gaze, and they create vampires by killing others. Their attacks drain levels as well. Of course, vampires have several specific weaknesses, too. Holy symbols, mirrors, and garlic are things they have a severe aversion to, and they must sleep in a coffin during the daylight whose bottom is covered in soil from their grave. Vampires were a type of undead that fed on blood. They were one of the most feared and powerful undead creatures. A vampire looked very much like it did when alive, but with paler skin, hardened and feral features giving them a predatory aspect, and red eyes that were hard to forget. Their hands were clawed. They did not cast shadows and had no reflections in mirrors. Vampires enjoyed fine things and engaging in decadent behavior, sharing such habits with liches. A vampire was always a creature of evil. If it was not evil in life, it became so in undeath. Vampires don't look very dead. Though pale and drawn, and often with a fierce, predatory look in their eyes, and though they do possess fangs, they can largely blend into a human populace if they so choose. They look very similar to how they appeared in life. A vampire retained all the abilities it had in life, and it gained the ability to drain blood and life energy and to dominate other creatures with its gaze. A vampire could also command rats, bats, and wolves, or take the form of those creatures. A vampire can be of any evil alignment, and if its alignment was not evil in life, it becomes so in undeath. A vampire retains all the abilities it had in life, and gains the ability to drain blood and life energy and to dominate other creatures with its gaze. A vampire can also command rats, bats, and wolves, or take the form of those creatures. They also become superhumanly strong, can heal quickly or even regenerate, and can turn into a gaseous form. Vampires were eternally bound to their coffins and the unholy earth where they were buried. Vampires could not tolerate the smell of garlic and would not voluntarily enter an area with a strong odor of it. A new vampire was created when another vampire drained the life out of a living creature. The humanoid or monstrous humanoid could become a vampire. Half vampires could be created in one of two ways. First, in some rare cases, a vampire could consume enough blood that it could breed with a humanoid or monstrous humanoid, creating half vampire offspring. Second, in even rarer cases, if a pregnant mother survived having her blood drained by a vampire, her unborn could be tainted with vampirism instead. Master vampires were vampires that had perfected the art of taking spawn, and as a result, could lead large gangs of them. They usually had one chosen spawn that was much better than the others. However, all of a master vampire's spawn were better than the norm, stronger, faster, and more numerous. A vampire chooses a grand yet defensible location for its lair, such as a castle, fortified manor, or walled abbey. It hides its coffin in an underground crypt or vault guarded by vampire spawn or other loyal creatures of the night. Vampires typically plotted to empower themselves and produce spawn that would spread across the world. If the vampire isn't in sunlight or running water, it can use its action to polymorph into a tiny bat or a medium cloud of mist, or back into its true form. While in bat form, the vampire can't speak, its walking speed is 5 feet, and it has a flying speed of 30 feet. Its statistics, other than its size and speed, are unchanged. Anything it is wearing transforms with it, but nothing it is carrying does. It reverts to its true form if it dies. While in mist form, the vampire can't take any actions, speak, or manipulate objects. It is weightless, has a flying speed of 20 feet, can hover, and can enter a hostile creature's space and stop there. In addition, if air can pass through a space, the mist can do so without squeezing, and it can't pass through water. It has advantage on strength, dexterity, and constitution saving throws, and it is immune to all non-magical damage, except the damage it takes from sunlight. The vampire regains 20 hit points at the start of its turn if it has at least 1 hit point and isn't in sunlight or running water. If the vampire takes radiant damage or damage from holy water, this trait doesn't function at the start of the vampire's next turn. The vampire can climb difficult surfaces, including upside down on ceilings, without needing to make an ability check. When it drops to 0 hit points outside its resting place, the vampire transforms into a cloud of mist instead of falling unconscious, provided that it isn't in sunlight or running water. If it can't transform, it is destroyed. The vampire does have some limitations. Specifically, they can't enter a residence without an invitation from one of the occupants. The vampire takes 20 acid damage if it ends its turn in running water. If a piercing weapon made of wood is driven into the vampire's heart while the vampire is incapacitated in its resting place, the vampire is paralyzed until the stake is removed. The vampire takes 20 radiant damage when it starts its turn in sunlight. While in sunlight, it has disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks. The region surrounding a vampire's lair is warped by the creature's unnatural presence, creating any of the following effects. There's a noticeable increase in the populations of bats, rats, and wolves in the region. Plants within 500 feet of the lair wither, and their stems and branches become twisted and thorny. Shadows cast within 500 feet of the lair seem abnormally gaunt and sometimes move as though alive. A creeping fog clings to the ground within 500 feet of the vampire's lair. The fog occasionally takes eerie forms, such as grasping claws and writhing serpents. If the vampire is destroyed, these effects end after 2 to 12 days.